So I want to tell you about something. As I was growing up, my mom's here. Mom, wave to everybody. That's my mom. She's awesome. So growing up, I grew up in a single-parent home. So my mom raised the three of us. I was the oldest. I was the best. The other two were a pain, but it's okay. But anyways, growing up in our home, my mom taught me a lot about money. And what she taught me really was about hard work and how hard it can be to work, to provide for your family, to support. My mom, again, being single mom, and she was, I always get this wrong, I think it was going to school at night, working during the day. It might have been flipped, but she was doing both of those at the same time, going through nursing school to become a nurse, which she did, and then did that for many years. And so growing up, I was watching that unfold, and I learned all about hard work and how, really, money, even though it kind of does grow on trees because it's paper, but money doesn't grow on trees. Like, you work for it, right? It's something that you work for. I remember growing up, too, that I wanted an in-ground basketball goal so bad, and she got it for me. And I learned years later that she put on a garage sale, right? Sold a ton of stuff to be able to get that. So she taught us a lot, me, my brother, my sister, about hard work and that connection to money. And then my dad also was helpful with money, and he taught us about giving. He taught us about tithing. So my dad, every other weekend when we'd go to his house, he would give us a $10 allowance. But as soon as he gave us $10, he would then say, but first, before you can spend it, you got to give your tithe to the church. And I remember thinking, well, I don't know what that means, and I don't know how much that is, but it's not sounding good as you say that. And sure enough, I learned that tithe meant 10%. We talked about that a little bit last week. And that 10% of $10 is $1. Good, y'all are so smart. And so every week, before we could spend it, we had to put our dollar into the tray. That's when they pass the buckets. We don't do that anymore. But that's when you put the dollar in the tray. And I remember we would try to, first of all, it was so hard because at my time of life, just a few years ago at that age, CDs were around. You remember CDs? I know the young people don't understand this, but they were all about $9.99. So that $1 really killed me, right? Like, it took away all dreams of that CD that I probably shouldn't have had, if we're being honest, because the music I listened to back then. But regardless, it was hard. So I remember what we would try to do is we'd go to church, but then we'd try to sneak to the restroom right before the plate would pass and see if we could get, and somehow Dad just always remembered there was a basket on the way out the door too. And so we never got away with it. But anyways, the point is, I learned a lot about money from my upbringing, and I'm going to imagine that for most of us, the story is the same, that we learned a lot, maybe good, maybe bad, but we learned or absorbed a lot of things about money as we were being raised. And so newsflash, for those of us that are parents or grandparents, we are teaching our kids as well, whether we're trying to or not. That these things, like what it looks like to be someone that's generous or that gives, forget the church, just in general, how we manage our money, how we handle what the things we buy, all these kind of, our kids are absorbing that. And so as I think about that, I realize, man, it's important that we have a pretty healthy grasp, maybe never perfect, but a healthy grasp on how all this works. And so over the last week and this week and the next week to come, we're in this series really looking at what does it look like for the Christ follower to be generous? The Christ follower to be generous. So as we launch out into this, we recognize that in all of our rooms across all of our churches, that there's different groups of people, right? There are some of us here, and gosh, we are so glad that you're here. There are some of us here that you're kind of exploring faith. Haven't quite decided to be a follower of Christ, to give your life to Him, but you're here and you're asking questions or kind of curious. Maybe someone drugged you, but regardless, you're here. And so for you, I just want to encourage you that today and next week, these are great moments to just kind of listen in and see, what does God say about money? How does God work some of these things out? It's a great time to just get some perspective. But the other group of us in the room are those that have given our life to Christ. We've become what we describe as Christ followers, as Christians. And so for us, there are some clear principles that God lays out for us when it comes to obedience in the life of a Christian. And one of those areas actually has to do with our money, and I'll use the word more particularly, our generosity. That God's got clear examples. Now, inside of the Christ follower, there's also a couple other categories here at River Pointe. There are some of us here today that you're a Christian, but you're just visiting our church. And so for you, I want to say, this is just a great time to learn a little bit about us. kind of how we do things, what we're about. And maybe if you decide to make this place home, this could be something you lean into down the road. But the other group, the last part, are those that are newer to our family and have been here a long time. And for you guys, I really hope that today is really important. In fact, this whole series would be really important to you because this church is really important to all of us. I know that as I talk to you and see you out in the lobby. God's been so good to us, and we want to be faithful in that. So lots of groups of people here, but I want to make sure everyone's kind of on the same page as to what we're expecting here today. Now, last week, our senior pastor, Chad Brugman, kicked off this little series that we're doing. And he talked about a handful of things. The first thing that he said that he kind of drove throughout the message, and I want to extend it to you once again, is this: that we desire something for you, not from you. That we desire something for you more than we want something from you. Okay, that there are some wonderful, beautiful, exciting things that come into our life when we lean into this idea of being generous with what God has given us. And so that's our hope, is that you'd get excited about following the Lord and His lead rather than just giving to something. That's our hope as we navigate this series. Now, he covered a couple other things that are important. One of the things he covered was tithing. We talked about tithe. Tithe is a 10% of one's income. We see this in the Old Testament. These are some Old Testament giving principles. In fact, so you know where it comes from Malachi 3:10. And it says this. That'll be on the next slide here. It says, "Bring the full tithe into the storehouse, that there may be food in my house, and thereby put me to the test." It's the only time in Scripture God says that. Says the Lord of hosts. Will I not open the windows of heaven for you and pour down for you a blessing until there is no more need? And so God says, hey, this is Old Testament. We're living in New Testament days, but in Old Testament, this was the principle that whatever you made or whatever you produced, agriculture was more the driving force there. Hey, to bring 10% to God, to offer it to Him so that He could take it and use it to serve people, to meet needs and all that. And then we saw another principle, which was this idea of first fruits. This one may be a little less common to you. First fruits comes from another passage of Scripture found in Proverbs, and it says this. Proverbs says, "Honor the Lord with your wealth and the first fruits of all you produce. Then your barns will be filled with plenty, and your vats will be bursting with wine." So the idea, again, the agriculture state, right? But the idea is, hey, bring your first and your best to God, not your leftovers. So just as an example, what Sarah and I do is I know that it's really hard every paycheck to go, okay, I'm going to bring it to the church today. We're going to give it. That can be hard. So we just decided, hey, technology is amazing. We're going to do the recurring giving. As soon as the paycheck hits, we're going to give to the church. It's done. We don't have to think about it. We don't have to fight through it. It just happens, right? So that may be something you can consider. But that's the idea of the first fruits, that I don't want to get through it all and then go, okay, there's a little bit left over. All right, God, enjoy, right? No, I want to give Him the first and the best. This is the principle of first fruits. Again, we see in the Old Testament. Then the last one is charity, which would encompass multiple things. Seed, this is giving to the needy, helping those in need. This is also giving to things that could birth more things, right? So that's where the seed came from. I want to invest in that because I believe that's going to be something God's going to be able to use. And so we see lots of different principles in the key Old Testament. Now, what Chad told us last week is that Jesus didn't come to destroy it. He came to fulfill it. But in simple terms, we have a new command in the New Testament wrapped around the principles of giving. And the easiest way to look at it is this, that 2 Corinthians 9:7, each one must give as he or she has decided in his or her heart, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. And so when it comes to us today, the idea is, hey, the ball's in your court. As you and the Lord navigate your family and your finances and all of that, He says, hey, key word though, just be cheerful. Lean into something with excitement. Doesn't mean it's not sacrificial, right? Because anytime we give something away, we lose something by giving something. And yet what God is saying is, hey, you're going to gain something. In fact, Jesus specifically said this in Luke 6:38. He said, give, and it will be given to you. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, will be put into your lap. For with the measure you use will be measured back to you. He says, hey, if you do this, watch what I do next. And right there, I just want to pause you. Time out you. Because here's the deal. I think this is something we want to be careful with. This is true. What God has said in Scripture is true. That He will bless us when we are faithful to be generous to others. However, I do not believe we should go into being generous just to receive. It's got to come from the cheerful heart, right? And also I want to say to you that just because He said He'll do this doesn't necessarily mean that if you give $1,000 that $2,000 are coming back. Get ready. Like, that's not the promise. Now, He did promise something big. I mean, I can't even translate what He's saying here. Maybe that's on purpose. But it isn't a promise that, man, it's like an investment here in the stock market. Like, I'm going to do that. It's going to come back to me 2 times, 3 times. What God does, God does. And so I like to think of it as I want to balance my blessings here, the expectation of God's blessings. So here's some examples. Sometimes you will get money. Maybe you got a mail in the check God just delivered. We've seen that happen with Sarah's parents before when we were getting married. They were in a desperate place, and literally someone put a check in the mailbox and sent it to them. Now, that hasn't happened to us. Our address is 880. I'm saying, like, that hasn't happened to us, so that's not the guarantee, right? That may be the unique situation. Other times, it's just God giving favor in areas that are connected to finances. So I think about Sarah and I, we have been in 2 homes, or purchased 2 homes, one in Katy where we were currently are serving at our past church, and then moving here. In the first house, how we got the house was clearly a miracle of God. We found a house that we loved. We put a little, you know, how you put an offer in and you just pray they'll accept it. They never do. They always want more. It always is a fight. Well, we got into a fight with a relocation agency. And those guys can just do whatever they want, right? And so there's this bid going on, and they outbid us, and we were like, okay, cool, we're walking away. It's not meant to be. God didn't want us to have it. And then we get a phone call, and the realtor says, hey, guess what? You're never going to believe this. The couple that owns the house found out that you're a pastor, and they saw your kids, and they want to help you. They have kicked out the relo company. They brought the price back down to the asking price, and they said, take your time. Let us know when you get the finances out. Now, we didn't get money in the bank, but we saw God's favor in the realm of finances. You see what I'm saying? And the same thing in a similar way happened with the house moving here. It was just this odd term where we needed them to be able to wait, but we needed to close. We needed the people buying our old house to be able to wait and to close. And all of those things lined up, and we were able to get the perfect home for our family. So the point is, it's not necessarily that I give so that I can just get a whole lot back. But what does happen is we see God just move in ways that are hard to quantify, and yet it's clear that it's totally Him. And so I want you to have a healthy perspective of this, because I don't want you to just give and expecting it's all going to just come back, but instead, God's going to do what God does, and He is a God of blessing, and it doesn't mean we will be spared from all financial hardship, but man, if this is what His words are, doesn't that give us just such great confidence to go, you know what? Maybe I will lean into this and see what God can do when I'm found faithful. So what happens in the life of a Christian when they start to give? What are some of the things that develop? Well, there's a couple things I think are important. Here's the first one. The first one is giving is a way for us to worship God. It's a way for us to recognize that, man, God is there, that God is the source of all blessings in our life. And man, I just want to replicate the generosity He's given to me back to Him because He's worthy, right? It is our way of recognizing who God is. In fact, I got to show you something. This is so cool. So this morning, Charlie is, oh my gosh, how old is Charlie? 5. Thank you, Mom. I see you over there. 5.5-year-old Charlie, for the last, 4 or 5 weeks, 6 weeks, maybe somewhere in that range, she has been bringing her tithe to church every Sunday. And last week, Sarah and I were sitting here, and the kids were in service, and I remember leaning over to Sarah like, what's going on? Did our kidmen screw up? What do we do now? The kids are in church, not in the kidmen, something wrong. And she said, no, I think she's either here to give her offering or they like the music, I don't know. Turns out Charlie and her sister love to come early and listen to the music. But also, Charlie's made sure in the last 4 or 5 weeks before she leaves, that she gives her offering. And this morning, I was privileged to be able to take it from her. And what they told us is, she said, I want to make sure this goes to the church because I want people that are in need to have it. I want to be able to help. Man, there's something beautiful, right? When we lean into this, and here's what Charlie knows. Charlie doesn't know about the church. Like, I'm going to show you some things about kind of what we do and where we are. She doesn't know any of that. She's giving because she wants to worship God. She's giving because she knows that that's something she wants to be a part of, right? And so one of the ways is man, our giving is a picture of our worship back to him. And then it's a picture of our gratitude. That, man, God has been so good to us. Why would we not want to be good back to him? I have this fun little illustration that I think helps encapsulate. Okay, so check this out. This is a box of donuts. Anybody hungry? Who's hungry? Chris, you hungry? Can I use you as my illustration? I'm going to come down to you. You're pretty healthy, so this might not be the same. Okay, I got a box of donuts, bro. Sorry, camera guys, I warned you. All right, I'm going to give this to you. This is my gift to you, okay? This is out of my pocket. I paid for this, okay? I just want to point that out to you. And they were warm when we bought them. So let's just pretend they're still warm, okay? I'm going to give you that whole box, okay? Isn't that awesome? That's amazing. Hey, but you know what? Actually, one thing. But I gave you the whole box, but I'm wondering, would you just give me one back? Like, would that be too much asked if you gave me one back? Nah. Okay, I don't actually want it. You take the donuts because it's too tempting. But what if Chris said no? Like, wouldn't that be crazy? If I came down and said, bro, here's a box of a dozen donuts, you're the man, and I go, but you know what, I'm kind of, do you mind if I just have one? And what if he said no? Wouldn't that be kind of weird? Kind of odd, right? You can set them down. I feel like I'm tempting you right now. I'm so sorry. What I want you to see, though, is there's a similar idea here when it comes to our gratitude with God. Like, when we look at all the things, not just our finances, that God has given us, like, isn't a natural reaction to go, man, God, you have blessed me so much. What can I do and give back to you? How can I keep this thing going? When we give, it's a picture of our gratitude to him. It also expresses trust. It helps us to be reminded that, man, you know what? Remember we talked about sacrificial giving. I'm going to give a little bit because I trust that God's in control. I trust that God's doing something. God's working, and man, I want to be a part of it. Yes, I might miss out on a little something, but I'm just trusting that he is in complete control. I'm not worried about it. But then here's the final one. This is where we'll camp out for the remainder of the morning. Is the fourth way is that when we give, what happens is we have the chance to support the church. Now, again, maybe some of us are new here. Just know this isn't necessarily for you. It's a chance for you to just listen in. But if you've been here for a while, call this place home, there's a fourth piece of the beauty of giving, and that is the opportunity to support the church. In fact, in Acts 2:44, I switched it up on my slide, guys. Let's see if they nailed it. Acts 2:44. Boom, you guys are awesome. It says this is right as the early church was being started. It says, and all who believed were together and had all things in common. So here's the church coming together. And they were selling their possessions and belongings and distributing the proceeds to all as any had need. Now, we're not going to ask you to sell everything you have, bring it all to the church. We're not going to do that. But the idea was, hey, we're all in this thing together. That, man, we're working this out together. And when one has need, man, we want to help. And when we're in need, people want to come and help us. And so the same picture is still extended here into the church today. That, hey, as we come together, we realize, listen, we are a nonprofit organization. We don't get to make any money. It comes from all of us banding together and saying, man, we think God's doing something here, and I just want to be a part of that. Man, I want to worship him. I want to show my gratitude to him. I want to trust him. I want to show my expression of trust to him, but I also want to support this thing. I saw some of you today. I don't know if you know. Well, I know Scott, wherever you are. Scott walked in today. I don't think he was planning this, and he said, it just feels good to walk in here. I was like, man, I wish I had that on video because that would have been perfect for this moment. But man, there is something so special about what God's doing here, and we get to be a part of it. And so this is what it looks like. So let me show you a couple things about Missouri City. Some of you may not realize the story of Missouri City, but it's quite interesting. So we have 3 campuses, physical campuses across the city. The Richmond campus, our West End campus. We also have the Ramsey unit, of course. And then finally, we have here the Missouri City campus. And in our history, what happened is the Richmond campus was that portable system at multiple different places for many years, and then they finally got a building. And once they got the building, I think the church had kind of decided we're not doing portable anymore because portable church is a complicated thing. but a group of folks from Missouri City who were driving to Richmond every Sunday said, we love this church so much. We see God doing incredible things, but it's really hard to get our friends to come from Missouri City and around out here. What would it look like if we started a campus in Missouri City? And I'm just going to be honest on behalf of the church, because I wasn't here yet. I don't think they were that interested at first. That sounds complicated. We just got out of portable church. Why would we want to go down that road again? And yet, those guys, those early group, kept pushing and pressing, and finally the decision was made. And so we went to Elkins. We were there in 2012, and we were there for about 7 years. And then we finally built the building that we're all sitting in 2019. And so it was a group of people that fought for this thing. And a group of people in leadership that said, you know what, as much as we don't necessarily want to do this, we see that there is potential here. We see that God could do something here. And look around, look what's happened. It's incredible. In fact, let me show you. I can't show you all the numbers of all of our history, but let me show you this. 2022, 2 years ago, children's attendance, 232, students, 46. Overall, we had about 1,000 people coming to church. That was in 2002. Look what happened in 2023, the next year. Children's went up to 283, students went to 55, and overall, we were at 1,272. These are the averages, of course, over the year. But I'm going to show you something. Look what's happened in the last 7 weeks. This is what's happened. Children's is up to 324. Students, 151. It was 55. Do you remember that? And overall, we're averaging just over 1,400 people gathering on this campus every week. Now that, my friends, is incredible. That God is doing something. And of course, attendance isn't the only thing that matters, but numbers represent people. And people represent opportunity for God to be working in your life and in my life, in the lives of our neighbors and our friends. That's a beautiful thing. But here's the thing in the church world. Here's the secret. Everybody wants to grow until you grow. Because then once you grow, you find problems. Here's one of the problems. I'm going to give you two of them. I could go on, but I'm not going to do it because that's not what this is for. But I'm going to give you two because I have the platform. Number one, kids. We love your kids, but you keep having kids. And they keep coming. And we're running out of room for our kiddos. And man, it's crazy. One of these weeks during the 7, we had 370 kids on the campus. And I went with Terry and Germani afterwards, and I said, man, tell me how I'm excited, right? 370 kids, it's amazing. And they're like, we cannot do this for 2 more weeks. And I said, okay, well, we'll pray that God will bring it down just a little bit. And sure enough, he was faithful, but that was the first time we all said, uh-oh, okay, we're headed to a place that's gonna be tough. We need some solutions for our kids. And I'm gonna tell you, our team is so smart. They have worked so hard and they're so prayerful that we have a solution. We think we can add another room into the mix right here with where we are. But as always, there's a cost. There's things connected to it that it requires. Our kids is something we're really looking at. The other thing I want to show you is that, man, as our attendance has grown, right? I mean, you saw that massive increase. We have, up until just a couple weeks ago, 3 out of our 5 key positions here are done by part-time folks. Part-time folks working basically full-time hours to make this thing work. We've grown past the system we once had. These are areas that we're looking at going, okay, we've got to figure this thing out because, man, what God is doing, we want to be able to keep it going. And so there are some amazing things happening. But then if you remember, a couple weeks ago, we put a prayer card on every seat. You guys remember that if you were here? And we asked you, and you were so faithful, and we're so grateful. You were filling out those prayer cards. And our team took them, and we prayed over every single one of them. In fact, our team was telling me that some of them have been here way longer than I've even been here. That it was one of the most amazing experiences they've had getting to pray over you and to hear all those things in their entire time working here. It was a great gift for us. But as we were praying through those cards, we started recognizing some trends. A lot of prayer requests for marriage, for parenting. A lot of prayer requests for personal growth, both spiritually and just in life. And in that moment, we kind of paused and we were in a circle trying to share some of these. And we celebrated. We thought, man, we're doing things like date night. We've got moms groups, we've got women's groups, we've got Men of Mo that we just did, and all these small groups. And this is awesome, but these prayer cards mean there's more to do. That there's more needed, and we want to keep leaning into those things. Those are so important. We just did the parent night, which was incredible. And as soon as it was over, guess what we heard? When's the next one? Like, I don't know. We just got through this one. But we get it because, man, there's so much that we need in our families, in our lives, and we want to lean into that. But if we're going to develop them, it takes things to do it. The other thing we noticed, though, and I'm going to be honest with you, it caught me off guard. There were 2 key prayer requests that came up a ton. It was alcohol and cancer. And in that moment, I should tell you, this is how my brain thinks. I thought, I don't know how we fix that, but we've got to do something about that. And so right there on the spot, we just said, I don't know how we're going to do it. I don't know how, but we're going to figure this out. We have got to get an AA equivalent to this campus, and we have got to get a cancer support group to this campus as fast as possible. Now listen, I could list a whole bunch of things, but what I want you to see is just a taste of what God's doing, but also what I think God has on the horizon. But it goes back to that Acts verse, that it's going to take all of us to lean in together and to make this thing happen. Let me show you one more short passage of scripture and we'll be done. 2 Corinthians 8, 10 through 11 says this. This is Paul. He's writing to the church of Corinth, who about a year prior to this made a commitment to help some Christians in Jerusalem that were really suffering. They were in a really tight spot, and they were being persecuted. They were in need, and they agreed to jump in and help. But along the way, they kind of lost some traction with that. This is what he says. Here's my advice. It would be good for you to finish what you started a year ago. Last year, you were the first who wanted to give, and you were the first to begin doing it. Next slide. Now you should finish what you started. Let the eagerness you showed in the beginning be matched now by your giving. Give in proportion to what you have. Now, when I read that, I want to share with you why that was important to me. Because here's what's happened at our campus, not just our church. By the way, next week we'll hear a lot about our church as a whole, but I want to show you our campus. Put up that next slide. Previously, we had 430 family units. That could be a single, that could be a family. The amount given is irrelevant. We had 430 families leaning in and being a part of this thing. But really, over the last year and a half, with all the different things that have happened with us, we've dropped down to 345 families that have said, I want to lean in and be a part of this. So as I share with you all of the growth, and I share with you all of the vision, we're also working a bit from a deficit because we're under where we just were, not mentioning where we want to go. And so what I want you to see today, as I think of Paul's words and I go, man, that church in Corinth, they were in the same boat. That they got excited, because here's the deal. A lot of this reflects pausing of giving, not leaving of the church. That a lot of people, just for various reasons, no big deal, just said, hey, we're going to put a pause on that. And that's where we've landed. And so I think of Paul's words and I go, man, maybe we need to all be reminded of what it was that excited us in the first place. That got us fired up to be a part of this thing. And maybe we can lean into this thing and make this happen. And so Paul's words to me, they're beautiful. Let me finish this statement just so I make sure you see this. The last part, verse 12 through 14, says, whatever you give is acceptable if you give it eagerly. And give according to what you have, not what you don't have. Of course, I don't mean your giving should make life easy for others and hard for yourselves. Next slide. I only mean that there should be some equality. Right now you have plenty and can help those who are in need. Later, they will have plenty and can share with you when you need it. In this way, things will be equal. There's going to be seasons when we can, and maybe some seasons when we can't. And Paul just says, let's just be faithful. And so our hope for you today is you get maybe just a taste of what's happening, where we are. There's no ask today, by the way. We're going to look at some of that next week. But what I wanted to do was to paint a picture for you locally and just remind you that, man, God has called us to lean into it, and it's a beautiful thing. I want to share with you one last story, and we'll be done. I was thinking about Carly's here with us today. She's a friend. We played in a pickleball tournament yesterday. It was a really fun time, and she lost. It's okay. But that was with love. That was with love. But I was thinking about her husband, Eric, Carly, their daughter, Briley, and their son, Dylan. And they were one of the first families. We met a lot of families when we first got here, but they were one of the first families we met. And I remember when I met Eric, you were pretty well put together. But when I met Eric, I remember thinking, oh, okay, this is going to be an interesting one. This dude was just wild, all right? He was just wild. Let's just put it that way. But, man, I am telling you, what I have seen over the last 2 years in your family, but particularly between you and Eric, as I've seen them individually grow, grow in their marriage. They've been a part of date night, mom's group, men of Mo. I mean, fill in the blank. They've been a part. Their kids and the kid. Like, you're watching God do work. And then Eric, we started this, I don't know, maybe 8 months ago, but I started having a men's group at my house. And I invited Eric to come. And he came up to me the first night, and he's like, I've never been in a small group before. And I was like, you're kidding me. This is awesome, man. How great. And now, here we are. Like I said, it's been about 8 months. In the last handful of weeks when we meet, it's Eric that's dropping these truth bombs on everybody. And they're all just like, dude, where did you get that? What is happening? Like, growth. He's reading his Bible. He's reading with his kids. Like, these things are happening, and you guys, got to be a part of that. And there are so many stories that we could list one after another that God is doing great things. Like, what we're talking about today is being a part of helping people grow and get to know God. That's what this thing is about. And so my prayer for you is that you take some time this week, maybe together with your spouse. If you're single, maybe just pray with the Lord and say, man, God, what are you calling me to be a part of? I think I might want to help. And ask God to give you some guidance in that. We don't have pressure for you. We don't want you to give out of compulsion, as that verse said. We want you to give because you look at this thing and go, man, I think this is something I want to be a part of. And gosh, we would love it. And I want you to remember, for every one of us, and this is to me too, we're sitting in this room. We're sitting in these chairs because of a group of people that gave generously years and years ago before we ever got here. And because of them, we stand on their shoulders, right? We are standing on their shoulders. Most City Campus exists because of the generosity of others long before us. And now it's our turn, right? It's our turn to take the mission forward. And so I'm just hoping, praying this was received well, and it might excite you to be a part of what God can keep doing, not just in your life, but in the life of the people here and in the life of people just out there that we so desperately want to reach on his behalf.